The Secret Empire, the rise and fall of the man who controlled oil. There was a time when a single name could inspire both fear and admiration in equal measure. John D. Rockefeller wasn't just the world's first billionaire, he became one of the richest men in history. His empire, Standard Oil, wasn't just a company. It was a machine of ruthless domination, crushing competitors, bribing governments and treating business like a battlefield. But who was the man behind the myth? How did a poor boy raised amid scandal and betrayal climb the ladder of power to become an unparalleled titan? And what was he willing to sacrifice on that journey? Rockefeller's story is a tapestry of unchecked ambition, brutal strategies, and a thirst for control that redefined modern capitalism. But behind the unimaginable wealth and generous donations lay dark secrets, powerful enemies, shadowy deals, and a spectacular downfall. In the end, one question remains: was Rockefeller a ruthless genius or a misunderstood visionary? The answer might surprise you. Watch until the last second. The questions no one dared to ask about Rockefeller will be answered by him in the end, like a whisper from the past. In 1839, in a small rural town, John D. Rockefeller was born, the son of a bankrupt farmer and a devout mother. Life wasn't easy. Patched clothes, cold nights, and an absent father known as Devil Bill. Bill Rockefeller was no ordinary man. He would disappear for months, only to return bearing expensive gifts before vanishing again. What no one knew was that he led a double life as a charlatan, selling miracle cures under the fake name Dr. William Livingston. Meanwhile, young John, still a child, was already showing his entrepreneurial mind. He raised turkeys to sell, saved every penny, and helped his mother support the family. But everything fell apart when his father was accused of a horrific crime, sexual assault. The family fled, leaving public shame behind. At 16, with his father increasingly distant and a family to support, John dropped out of school. He knew that if he wanted a better life, he would have to build it with his own hands. By 18, John D. Rockefeller already carried the determination of someone who knew success wouldn't come for free. His first job as a bookkeeper, though poorly paid, became his business school. He didn't just learn to handle numbers, he also observed how companies operated, who the most profitable clients were, which suppliers charged abusive prices, and how owners made decisions. Every detail was a lesson stored in his calculating mind. It was during this time that he met Maurice Clark, an ambitious chemist who saw in Rockefeller not just a skilled accountant, but a potential partner. Together, they founded Clark and Rockefeller, a company trading grain, fish, and other goods. The Civil War was raging, and food price inflation made the business extremely profitable. While many feared instability, Rockefeller and Clark saw opportunity, and soon their profits soared. But Rockefeller wasn't satisfied. He was always looking for ways to expand. And that's how he met Samuel Andrews, a young chemist who had discovered a revolutionary way to refine oil. Though initially considering it just a side project, Rockefeller quickly realized the future was in oil, not grain. When the first barrel of refined kerosene sold successfully, he knew he had struck gold. However, the oil market was volatile. Prices plummeted when new wells were discovered and soared when supply dwindled. Maurice Clark, more cautious, wanted out before a crisis ruined them. Rockefeller, though, made a bold move. He bought Clark's share for $72,500, taking on the risks and potential profits alone. Then, as if fate were on his side, a massive new oil reserve was discovered in Pennsylvania. The market stabilized, and Rockefeller, now the sole owner of the refinery, renamed it Standard Oil. He was ready to dominate the industry, and he would do it in the most ruthless way possible. With Standard Oil now under his full control, Rockefeller began executing a meticulous strategy to dominate the oil industry. He knew that to build a lasting empire, he needed to control not just production, but the entire supply chain, from transportation to distribution. His first move was to approach the railroads, the lifeline of oil transport at the time. Rockefeller realized that the three major railroads, New York Central, Erie, and Pennsylvania Railroad, were fiercely competing for oil shipments. He exploited this rivalry to negotiate secret deals that gave him massive discounts in exchange for guaranteed shipping volumes. These railroad rebates were kept confidential, giving Standard Oil an unbeatable advantage over competitors. But Rockefeller went further. He instituted an even crueler system, Drawbacks, where he received a portion of the money his competitors paid to ship their own oil. This meant that the more rivals tried to compete, the more money ended up in Standard Oil's coffers. It was a masterstroke that slowly strangled all competition. When oil prices fell, Rockefeller used his financial power to wage price wars. He could operate at a loss long enough to bankrupt competitors, then buy them out for pennies on the dollar. Many small refiners, cornered, chose to sell to Rockefeller rather than face total ruin. These brutal tactics quickly made Standard Oil the dominant force in the industry. Within a few years, Rockefeller controlled about 90% of US refineries, transforming a chaotic industry into a well-oiled profit machine. But this meteoric rise wouldn't go unnoticed, and soon it would attract powerful enemies. In 1872, with oil prices in free fall, Rockefeller realized he needed a radical solution to save not just his company, but the entire industry. That's when Tom Scott, president of the powerful Pennsylvania Railroad, made him a tempting offer to join forces with major railroads and refiners in a secret cartel called the South Improvement Company, SIC. The deal was diabolical in its simplicity. In exchange for shipping all of Standard Oil's oil exclusively through them, the railroads would give Rockefeller discounts of up to 50% on shipping rates. But the real stroke of genius was the drawback clauses. Whenever a competitor shipped oil on these railroads, Standard Oil would receive a secret commission on their freight payments. It was as if his rivals were unknowingly funding their own destruction. Rockefeller also demanded full access to all other refiners' shipping records. This gave him inside information on his competitors' businesses, how many barrels they produced, who they sold to, and at what price. With this data, he could strategically suffocate rivals, slashing prices only in regions where they operated while keeping margins high elsewhere. When the scheme leaked to the press, the scandal was immense. Independent oil producers burned railroad tracks and stormed Standard Oil offices in protest. Public pressure was so intense that within 2 months, the cartel was dismantled. But Rockefeller learned a valuable lesson. If he couldn't dominate the market with secret deals, he would do it openly, through hostile takeovers and outright economic warfare. In the months that followed, in what became known as the Cleveland Massacre, Rockefeller used the fear generated by the SIC scandal to force 22 of Cleveland's 26 refineries to sell to him at rock-bottom prices. Some he bought for less than a third of their real value. Others were driven into bankruptcy when he cut off their access to suppliers and transportation. Soon, 90% of the region's refining capacity was under his control. The octopus was extending its tentacles. The victory in Cleveland solidified Rockefeller's dominance in oil refining, but a new challenge emerged when Tom Scott of the Pennsylvania Railroad decided to enter the oil business on his own. Not content with merely transporting oil, Scott began building his own pipelines and refineries, declaring open war on Standard Oil. To Rockefeller, this was more than competition. It was betrayal. Standard Oil's response was brutal and calculated. First, Rockefeller cancelled all contracts with the Pennsylvania Railroad, diverting his oil shipments to rival railroads. Then he launched a price war, artificially lowering kerosene costs in key regions until Scott's refineries lost all their customers. To make matters worse, he convinced other railroads to slash their rates, further suffocating the Pennsylvania. The attack was so effective that the once mighty Pennsylvania Railroad saw its stock plummet. Scott was forced to lay off thousands and cut wages by 20%, triggering one of the most violent strikes in American history. In Pittsburgh, angry workers burned 120 locomotives and 500 rail cars, causing damage worth billions today. The railroad never fully recovered. With Scott weakened, Rockefeller offered a truce, but on his terms. In exchange for returning some oil shipments to the Pennsylvania, he demanded even bigger discounts, detailed intelligence on competitors, and most valuable of all, a 20-cent per barrel drawback on all oil shipped by any company, including his rivals. It was a humiliating deal, but Scott had no choice. The victory over the Pennsylvania Railroad marked the peak of Rockefeller's power. Now he controlled 90% of US refining and dictated terms even to the nation's largest railroads. But this absolute power would come at a cost. As he counted his gains, a new enemy loomed on the horizon. The US government, which was beginning to see Standard Oil not as a company, but as a threat to democracy. With near total control of oil refining secured, Rockefeller realized his next move had to be even more ambitious. Dominate the entire supply chain, from well to consumer. The discovery of new oil fields in Ohio in 1885 presented the perfect opportunity. But there was a problem. Ohio's oil had such a strong foul odor that it was called skunk oil, considered useless by most refiners. While others ignored Ohio's oil, Rockefeller invested heavily in research. He hired the best chemists of the time, who soon discovered a way to remove the sulfur causing the stench. Suddenly, Standard Oil had access to an abundant source of crude that competitors couldn't use. This breakthrough allowed Rockefeller to buy Ohio oil fields for pennies, while others still doubted their value. But Rockefeller didn't stop there. He began building his own pipeline network, directly connecting wells to his refineries, reducing reliance on railroads. These pipelines not only cut costs, but gave Standard Oil unprecedented control over the flow of oil nationwide. At the same time, he acquired tanker fleets, built storage terminals in every major city, and even bought forests to ensure a supply of wooden barrels. The rise of automobiles in the late 1800s could have been a threat as they replaced kerosene lamps. But Rockefeller turned it into an advantage. Gasoline, once a worthless byproduct of refining, suddenly became Standard Oil's most profitable product. He quickly pivoted production to meet the new demand, proving once again his ability to anticipate market shifts. Meanwhile, his son John D. Rockefeller Jr. and advisor Frederick Gates began diversifying the family's holdings. Their boldest acquisition was the Mesabi Iron Range in Minnesota, the largest deposit of high-grade iron ore in America. This move put Rockefeller on a collision course with another industrial titan, Andrew Carnegie, the Steel King. The battle between America's two richest men was about to begin, and their battlefield would be nothing less than the future of American industrialization. The acquisition of the Mesabi mines put Rockefeller in direct conflict with Andrew Carnegie, triggering one of the greatest business battles of the 19th century. Carnegie, who had built his steel empire with an iron fist, saw Rockefeller's move into iron ore as a declaration of war. What followed was a high-stakes game of industrial chess, where every move was calculated to inflict maximum damage. Rockefeller launched his Mesabi operations with an aggressive strategy. He began selling high-grade ore below cost to Carnegie's competitors. Meanwhile, he bought stakes in critical railroads, creating a shipping bottleneck for Carnegie Steel. The play was so effective that by 1896, Carnegie Steel was forced to negotiate, with Carnegie privately admitting, "Rockefeller has found my Achilles heel." Carnegie's response came through his right-hand man, Henry Clay Frick, who tried to bypass Rockefeller by developing mines in Canada. But Rockefeller counterattacked by buying the land surrounding Carnegie's new mines, physically blocking his expansion. At the same time, he began building an experimental steel mill in Ohio, proving he was willing to invade Carnegie's territory if necessary. The standoff lasted years, with both sides losing millions in a war of attrition. The stalemate only ended when J.P. Morgan, Wall Street's most powerful banker, intervened. Morgan saw the feud as a threat to America's industrial stability and proposed an audacious solution: the creation of U.S. Steel, the first billion-dollar corporation, merging the interests of both titans. In a historic negotiation, John D. Rockefeller Jr., then just 27, faced off against Morgan and secured a spectacular deal, $88 million in U.S. Steel stock, which is worth $3 billion today for the Mesabi mines. Rockefeller's victory was total. He emerged even richer, while Carnegie announced his retirement soon after. But this epic battle would draw the attention of an even more dangerous adversary, the U.S. government. Despite his victory over Carnegie, Rockefeller would soon discover that his true opponent wasn't another tycoon, it was the US government itself. In 1902, President Theodore Roosevelt, determined to break monopolies, made Standard Oil his primary target. The Justice Department launched what would become the largest antitrust case in American history, compiling 1,400 pieces of evidence and 444 witnesses against Rockefeller's empire. The case centered on Standard Oil's predatory practices, secret railroad deals, price fixing, and control of over 90% of US oil refining. The press, led by journalist Ida Tarbell, whose father had been ruined by Rockefeller, published exposés revealing the company's brutal methods. Tarbell's articles dug into Rockefeller's personal life, including his father's scandals and political bribes, turning public opinion against him. During the 5-year trial, Standard Oil's defense argued that Rockefeller had simply been better at business than his competitors. They claimed kerosene prices had fallen 90% under Standard's dominance, benefiting consumers. But the judge wasn't convinced. On May 15, 1911, the Supreme Court ordered the breakup of Standard Oil into 34 independent companies, including future giants like Exxon, Mobil, and Chevron. To many's surprise, Standard Oil's dissolution didn't ruin Rockefeller. It made him richer. Since he held stock in all the spin-offs, his wealth skyrocketed as these new companies went public. While the government celebrated its victory as democracy triumphing over monopoly, Rockefeller became the world's first billionaire. His stakes in US steel and other industries only increased his financial power. But the trial marked the end of an era. At 72, Rockefeller stepped away from business to focus full-time on philanthropy. He had already donated hundreds of millions to universities and medical research, but now he would make charity his ultimate legacy. Meanwhile, some of Standard Oil's successor companies began expanding into a new promising market, Middle Eastern oil, where another story of power and domination was just beginning. In his final years, John D. Rockefeller became history's most fascinating paradox. The man who built his empire by crushing competitors without hesitation now spent his days methodically giving away his colossal fortune. Between 1911 and 1937, he donated $540 million, over $15 billion today, becoming not just the first billionaire, but also the world's greatest philanthropist. The Rockefeller Foundation, created in 1913, marked the industrialization of charity. With an initial endowment of $100 million, the foundation didn't just hand out money, it attacked global problems with the same ruthless efficiency Rockefeller had used in business. Its hookworm eradication program in the US South and tropical nations treated millions between 1910 and 1920, boosting farm productivity by 40% in affected regions. In education, Rockefeller applied his philosophy of investing in people. He didn't just build schools, he created entire education systems. His donations established the University of Chicago, which has produced 89 Nobel laureates, and funded Spelman College, a historic institution for black women's education. But his method had a dark side. Donations came with strict curriculum and governance conditions, leading critics to accuse him of monopolizing knowledge. Rockefeller's lifestyle in his later years was a study in contrasts. While giving away millions, he lived almost ascetically, counting pennies, reusing envelopes and wearing patched suits. His daily routine included golf games, always betting exactly 10 cents, never more, and religious hymn singing with his wife. At 90, he still personally reviewed the family's investments, treating his fortune with the same care he'd given his first oil barrels in Cleveland. When he died in 1937 at age 97, Rockefeller left behind a world he had helped shape, for better and worse. His corporate descendants, ExxonMobil and Chevron, still dominate global energy. His foundations continue influencing world medicine and education, but his most enduring legacy may be the paradox he embodied, how the same mix of ambition, efficiency and vision could build empires and then try to redeem them. On Rockefeller's simple tombstone in Cleveland's Lakeview Cemetery, just 3 words are engraved: "He did good." A statement that, like the man himself, remains open to interpretation. John D. Rockefeller left the world a paradox that still challenges our understanding of power, wealth, and social responsibility. His name remains synonymous with both capitalism's creative potential and its cruelest excesses. History shows us a man who could destroy competitors with ruthless tactics in the morning and donate millions to save lives in the afternoon, a duality that continues to intrigue historians and economists. The business model Rockefeller pioneered with Standard Oil revolutionized global industry, introducing concepts like vertical integration, economies of scale, and supply chain control still taught in top business schools. Yet his anti-competitive tactics became the textbook case for 20th century antitrust laws. Ironically, Standard Oil's court-ordered breakup in 1911 only multiplied his wealth, proving how his strategic vision outmaneuvered even government attempts to curb his power. In philanthropy, Rockefeller set a new standard that influenced generations of billionaires. His focus on measurable goals like eradicating specific diseases and his insistence on teaching to fish, not giving fish, created the model of strategic charity followed today by figures like Bill Gates. Yet even his good deeds drew criticism, with many accusing him of using philanthropy for social control and reputation laundering. Rockefeller's enduring impact can be seen everywhere. From the oil giants descended from Standard Oil to the universities and medical institutions he funded, even the concepts of corporate responsibility and social investing he helped define. His financial legacy was so well managed that over 80 years after his death, the Rockefeller family remains among America's wealthiest and most influential. Perhaps the final lesson of Rockefeller's life is that titanic power can never be judged in simple terms of good or evil. Like all great transformers of history, he was both a visionary who accelerated human progress and a monopolist who rigged the game. His true monument isn't in marble plaques or generous donations, but in the complex world he helped create, one where the same principles of efficiency and scale that built empires can also, when directed wisely, alleviate mass human suffering. This fundamental ambiguity is what makes his story so relevant and so challenging to our understanding of power and wealth in the 21st century. If you want to learn how to build wealth like him, turn on notifications and subscribe to the channel Invisible Millionaires. In the next video, we'll reveal how JP Morgan surpassed even Rockefeller in power, the man who bought America, the secret history of JP